A farmer in 9th century China digs into a hillside, searching for nothing in particular, and strikes something hard and pale beneath the soil. A curved white bone, far too large for any animal he has ever seen. Then another. Then a skull the length of his forearm, teeth still intact, jaw locked in a silent, ancient scream. He does not call this a fossil. That word does not exist for him yet. He calls it a dragon bone. And he is not alone. Most people assume dragon mythology spread the way stories usually do, through trade routes, conquest, or cultural contact, one civilization borrowing the imagination of another. That explanation collapses almost immediately under scrutiny. Dragon-like creatures appear in the myths of ancient China, Mesopotamia, Scandinavia, Mesoamerica, and Australia. Civilizations separated by oceans, mountain ranges, and thousands of years, many with no plausible contact with one another at all. A reptilian, often winged, often fire-associated creature, feared and worshipped in nearly identical form, on opposite sides of a planet no single person had ever fully circled. If dragons were only a story passed hand to hand, this should not be possible. Something else was happening. To understand what, you first have to abandon the assumption that ancient peoples were simply inventing monsters out of nothing. They were not inventing, they were interpreting. In 2001, paleontologist Adrienne Mayor proposed something that quietly reshaped how researchers understand ancient mythology. Across nearly every dragon-believing culture, she found the same geographic pattern repeating. Dragon legends clustered most densely in regions rich with large fossil deposits. Dragon bones sold in Chinese apothecaries for centuries, later identified as belonging to dinosaurs and prehistoric mammals that no human being had ever seen alive. Ancient people were not fabricating monsters from imagination alone. They were looking at real skeletal evidence of creatures larger and stranger than anything walking the earth around them, and doing the only thing a curious, pattern-seeking mind can do with an unexplained skull the size of a horse. They built a story large enough to contain it. But fossils alone cannot fully explain the dragon. Because dragons were never simply large, they were composite, scaled like a snake, clawed like a bird of prey, sometimes armored like a crocodile, sometimes breathing fire like nothing that has ever existed on Earth. This is where the story stops being only about bones and starts becoming something far more unsettling, a window into the architecture of fear itself. In 2013, evolutionary psychologist Lynn Isbett proposed a theory that had been quietly circling the edges of primate research for decades. She called it the snake detection hypothesis. Her claim was direct. Primate vision, including human vision, may have evolved its sharp color perception and rapid threat detection, specifically because of an ancient, prolonged arms race with venomous snakes. Long before there were lions to fear, or wolves, or rival humans, there were serpents in the undergrowth of the trees our ancestors slept in. Millions of years of that pressure did not fade quietly. It became embedded in the visual cortex itself, a part of the brain now proven in laboratory studies to detect the image of a snake faster than almost any other shape a human eye can register. The dragon's body was never a random design choice. It was assembled almost unconsciously from the deepest and most ancient fears a primate brain carries: the ambush of the serpent, the talons of the aerial predator, the armor of the ancient reptile, fused into a single creature large enough to represent something words alone could not hold. And once that creature existed in the imagination, it did something no ordinary fear could do. It became useful. Across nearly every early civilization, dragons guarded something: treasure, gateways, forbidden knowledge, the boundary between the living world and the underworld. This was not decorative. A society that could convince its members a monstrous guardian waited beyond a certain river, mountain, or cave did not need soldiers stationed at every dangerous border. Fear, once given a shape memorable enough to survive retelling, could patrol territory no human ever had to physically defend. The dragon was not only a monster, it was one of the earliest forms of psychological infrastructure a civilization could build, free, self-sustaining, and passed down without a single brick being laid. This raises an uncomfortable question the fossil explanation alone cannot answer. If dragons were simply misidentified bones, the myth should have faded the moment paleontology arrived to correct it. It did not. Dragons persisted in art, literature, religion, and imagination long after the scientific explanation for ancient bones was fully understood, which suggests the dragon was never really about the bones at all. The bones were only the evidence. The dragon itself was something the human mind seems compelled to build regardless. An image large enough, ancient enough, and frightening enough to hold humanity's oldest, most inherited terrors in a single silhouette. Every culture that ever looked into unexplained darkness, a cave, a fossil bed, the space beyond a firelit camp, appears to have reached for roughly the same shape to fill it. Not because they copied one another, but because underneath every language and every ocean separating them, They were built from the same ancient nervous system, shaped by the same ancient predators, staring into the same unresolved dark. Perhaps that is the truth still hiding beneath every dragon carved into a temple wall or painted onto a Viking ship's prow. They were never really about the creature at all. They were self-portraits of everything a species had learned to fear across millions of years, given scales, given wings, given a name so the fear could finally be looked at directly instead of felt in the dark, formless, and unnamed. We did not invent the dragon to frighten ourselves. We invented it because something inside us had been frightened for a very long time, before we ever had the words or the fire to say so out loud.